The red alert blinking on his comms device was the last thing Council Administrator Telvan wanted to see during his rest cycle. A flashing red light meant one thing: trouble. With a groan, he heaved himself off his sleeping platform, extending one of his 4 manipulator limbs to tap the screen. "This had better be an emergency," he grumbled. His assistant's voice came back, crackling with urgency. "Sir, you have to see this. The scout ship Morning Light just pinged us from the Orion Spur. They found something massive." Telvan felt his 2 hearts skip a beat. For 50,000 years, the Orion Spur was the galaxy's final unexplored frontier. Fleets of automated scouts had spent millennia mapping every star, every planet, every speck of dust. The Great Survey was nearly finished. What could possibly be hiding out there to warrant waking him? "Patch the data through," Telvan commanded, and a holographic display shimmered to life above his comms unit, data streams scrolling before his eyes. It started off boring. A yellow star, 8 planets, a few moons, textbook stuff. But when the data for the 3rd planet popped up, the air left his lungs. An oxygen and nitrogen atmosphere, oceans of liquid water, radio waves bleeding into space, signatures of artificial satellites. And then the bombshell: genetic markers that were a perfect match for the ancestors from the ancient colony worlds. Telvan could barely whisper the words. They found it. They actually found Earth. Just 2 standard hours later, Telvan was standing before the entire Galactic Council. The chamber was a colossal amphitheater, built to accommodate the representatives of 800 different species, and today, not a single seat was empty. The news had ripped through the galactic network like a shockwave. Everyone was desperate to know if the old legends were real. Council Speaker Morabith, a Velnari known for her legendary patience and wisdom, called the session to order. After 300 years in her position, a lifespan longer than most species could dream of, her voice commanded absolute respect. "Administrator Telvan has called this emergency session," she announced. "He has made the extraordinary claim that a scout vessel has located the mythical human homeworld. We will now examine his proof." Telvan stepped into the center of the floor and brought the main display to life. A breathtaking image of Earth materialized in the air, a swirl of deep blues, stark whites, and rich greens and browns. "This," Telvan began, his voice echoing, "is the planet the ancient archives called Earth. It's in the Orion Spur, precisely where the old star charts predicted." He gestured and the display shifted. "Our probe has been observing for 3 days. What we found is both incredible and deeply unsettling." New images appeared, the glittering lights of sprawling cities on the planet's night side. Vast swaths of farmland stretched across entire continents. Vessels traversed the oceans and aircraft crisscrossed the skies. "The planet is teeming with life," Telvan explained. "Billions of humans. They've built a technological civilization entirely on their own, cut off from the rest of us. They've harnessed electricity, invented computers, built chemical rockets, and they have achieved nuclear fission." A wave of gasps and murmurs rippled through the chamber. Representatives from 1,000 worlds turned to one another, a cacophony of languages erupting as the translation system struggled to keep up. "That's impossible," a voice boomed from the upper tiers. "No species advances that fast without guidance." "The proof is undeniable," Telvan countered, pulling up more data. "Our probe's remote systems collected biological samples. The genetic analysis is conclusive. The humans on Earth are identical to the descendants on our 47 established colony worlds. This is, without a doubt, their origin." Morabith raised a single slender arm, and a hush fell over the crowd. "If what you say is true," she said, her voice heavy, "we are facing a situation unlike any in our history. Our records state the ancestors fled Earth some 70,000 years ago. They seeded colonies across this galactic arm, and then they disappeared. We always assumed they had wiped themselves out." "They didn't just survive," Telvan clarified. "They thrived. They started over from scratch, with absolutely no memory of their galactic heritage, and they did it all alone." A massive, scale-covered Kazathi delegate rose to his feet. His species were warriors, and his voice was a low growl. "What kind of weapons are we talking about?" the Kazathi delegate demanded. "Are they a credible threat?" Telvin paused, the weight of his answer hanging in the chamber. "They have nuclear weapons," he said, his voice low. "Thousands of them. More than enough to scorch their own world clean of all life, several times over." A wave of murmurs and protests swept through the room. Nuclear arms were a galactic taboo, strictly controlled. Only a select few races were ever permitted to hold them, and even then, under the tightest possible watch. The very thought that some unknown backwater species had figured them out all on their own was deeply unsettling to most of the delegates. "They have to be contained," someone yelled from the floor. "Put a quarantine around their system until they evolve past this madness." "That could take thousands of years," another voice countered. "We can't just turn our backs on them for that long." "What happens when they invent faster-than-light travel on their own?" a third delegate cried out. Morbith again called for order, her voice cutting through the noise. "We will send a delegation," she declared. "A formal first contact mission. We must meet these humans face-to-face to understand their intentions. Only then can we decide what to do." "And who would lead such a mission?" the Kazathi delegate rumbled. Morbith considered it. "The harmonious endeavor. Captain Zur has more first contact experience than any officer in the fleet. If anyone can navigate this situation with the care it requires, it is her." The vote was cast, and despite the uproar, the motion passed with a huge majority. The galaxy was officially going to say hello to humanity. 3 hours later, Captain Zur was standing on the bridge of the harmonious endeavor, her brow furrowed as she reviewed the mission briefing. Her ship was the crown jewel of the diplomatic fleet, packed with state-of-the-art communication arrays and cultural databases. Her crew was a hand-picked mix of 12 different species, all chosen for their diplomatic instincts. "This is going to be a messy one," remarked her first officer, a Trowley whose species was known for their cold logic. "The historical files paint humans as erratic." "Every species is erratic until you get to know them," Zer replied calmly. Like Speaker Morabith, she was a Valari, though far younger. She'd made first contact with 43 different species in her time, and every single one had been a new puzzle. But this was on another level. This wasn't some fledgling species just discovering fire. This was an ancient race that had touched the stars, lost it all, and somehow clawed their way back. What had 70,000 years of total isolation done to them? "Lay in a course for Earth," Zir commanded, "maximum speed, and broadcast our peaceful intentions on every frequency they might be listening to. I want them to know we're coming as friends." The trip took 6 standard days, and every moment was spent poring over the fragmented records of ancient humanity. The archives were a mess, stitched together from ruins on a dozen different colony worlds. They told the story of a species that was brilliant, aggressive, intensely curious, and deeply, overwhelmingly emotional. One file described how ancient humans would form lifelong bonds with other species, treating them like family. Another told of human traders who would cross dangerous star systems just to deliver a gift to a friend. There were tales of human soldiers who would fight to the last breath for a lost cause, and of scientists who would chase a single question for their entire lives. "They sound," the communications officer noted dryly, "like a handful." "They sound fascinating," Zir corrected her. "Don't forget, the colonists who founded many of our worlds were these people. We owe this mission our utmost respect." As their ship slipped into Earth's solar system, the sensors began painting a far more detailed picture. The planet was even more advanced than the first probe had shown. A web of thousands of satellites wrapped the globe. Space stations orbited at various altitudes. They even detected signs of activity on the planet's moon, though it seemed there were no permanent bases yet. "They've certainly been busy," the tactical officer murmured. Just then, a shrill alarm blared through the bridge. The ship's defensive shield snapped on automatically. "Report!" Zur shouted. "We've been painted by an automated defense grid," the tactical officer called out. It's locking onto our approach. A defense grid? A cold knot formed in Zare's stomach. They have weapons in orbit, and powerful ones by the look of it. The scanning beam is using a technology I've never seen before. But before Zare could issue a command, a new signal cut through the static. It was a voice transmission, crisp and clear, in a language the ship's computer identified as English. Unidentified vessel, this is the Earth Orbital Defense Network. Please state your name and purpose. Hold your current position until a diplomatic channel can be established. The bridge crew just stared at each other, completely stunned. They were being put on hold by a species that had never met aliens before, by a defense system that by all logic shouldn't even exist. Captain Zare cleared her throat and switched on the universal translator. This is Captain Zare of the Galactic Council vessel, Harmonious Endeavor. We are here in peace to initiate first contact with the inhabitants of Earth. We will maintain our position as you've requested. There was a brief silence. Then the voice returned, sounding almost bubbly. Acknowledged, Harmonious Endeavor. Please stand by. We're waking up some folks who are going to be super excited to meet you. This might take a couple of minutes. Can we get you anything while you wait? Need any help with your ship's systems? Zare shot a look at her crew. Look. They looked every bit as baffled as she felt. In all her decades of first contact missions, no one had ever offered her a snack before they'd even shaken hands. No assistance is required, Zare replied, trying to keep her voice steady. We will wait. Great! Someone will be with you in a jiffy. Welcome to the neighborhood. The line went dead. Zare sank into her command chair, feeling a little lightheaded. What in the galaxy just happened? Her first officer whispered. I have absolutely no idea, Zare confessed. As they waited, more and more human ships started popping up on their sensors. Tiny little craft, probably just for zipping around in orbit. Bigger ships that looked like they could be hauling cargo. But every single one moved with a smooth, coordinated purpose, weaving through traffic patterns that screamed of a highly organized spacefaring society. How long have they been in space? Someone asked from the science station. The ship's computer crunched the numbers. Based on archived radio waves, humanity achieved its first successful orbital flight approximately 100 years ago. 100 years, Zare repeated, the words tasting like ash. They built all of this in just 100 years. The science officer double-checked the figures, convinced there had to be a mistake. The data appears to be accurate, Captain. A weird cocktail of awe and unease churned in Zare's gut. Humans had gone from flinging their first tin can into orbit to running a complex web of satellites, stations, and defense grids in a single century. That wasn't just fast, it was impossible. Most species needed at least 1,000 years to get that far. All across the galaxy, billions of beings were glued to the live feed of the event. Every news network was covering it. Every social feed was buzzing. But for the colony worlds founded by ancient humans, this was everything. People watched with bated breath. These were their long-lost ancestors, their genetic cousins. What would they be like? Would they even remember the old ways? Would they see the colonies as family? In the halls of power on 1,000 different worlds, officials fretted. If Earth was the official homeworld for 47 different colony populations, did that give them some kind of special authority? Could they start making claims on territory? Would the old treaties even matter anymore? But for most everyday people, it was just pure excitement. After 50,000 years of searching, the origin of one of the galaxy's greatest mysteries was finally solved. The humans of Earth had made it. They had survived, they had thrived, and they had built something incredible. And now, at long last, everyone was about to meet them. On the bridge of the Harmonious Endeavor, Captain Zare just waited, feeling completely out of her depth. She had a sinking feeling that nothing in her extensive first contact training had prepared her for this. The humans were about to say hello to the galaxy, and the galaxy was about to be turned upside down. The wait lasted for exactly 47 minutes. Captain Zare used the time to go over first contact protocols that suddenly felt ridiculously outdated and to try and soothe her jittery crew. Every few minutes, someone would report another human ship sliding into position around them. They weren't acting aggressive, just observing. It felt like being watched by a swarm of curious toddlers. Finally, the comm channel crackled to life again. This time, there was a video feed. A human face filled the main screen. A female Zeergast, based on the ancient records. She had rich, dark skin and short-cropped black hair. Her face was pulled into an expression the database labeled a smile. Captain Zer, hello. My name is Ambassador Chen Wei. So sorry for the delay. Your arrival was a little unexpected and we had to get a few different governments on the same page. I hope you can understand. Zer noticed something peculiar. The human was speaking her native English, but she was clearly aware that the harmonious endeavor had translators. She spoke slowly, with deliberate pauses between sentences to give the system time to work. Ambassador Chen, thank you for your response, Zer said. We realize our arrival must be a shock. We come with peaceful intentions, hoping to establish diplomatic relations with your people. Well, you've definitely made our year, Chen replied, her smile getting even wider. We've been hoping this day would come for a long time. We always kind of figured we weren't alone out here, but having you actually show up in our sky is, well, it's amazing. Would you be willing to come aboard our station? We've set up a reception area that should be able to accommodate your crew's needs. A reception? Zer was floored. You've already prepared facilities for us? Oh, sure. We've been tracking your approach for the past 2 days, Chen explained casually. We figured we'd use the time to get a proper meeting space ready. We weren't sure about your environmental needs, so we built a few different chambers with adjustable atmospheres, gravity, and temperatures. We also got some food and drinks together, though we have to admit, we have no earthly idea what you eat. We just kind of made as many different things as possible and hoped you could point us to what works. Zer glanced at her first officer. He looked like his brain had just melted. In her experience, newly discovered species were either hiding under their beds in terror or pointing weapons at you. None of them had ever prepared a welcome party with customizable environmental chambers and a buffet. That is incredibly thoughtful, Zer said slowly. We accept your invitation. Please send the docking coordinates. Transmitting now. And Captain, seriously, please let us know if you need anything. Anything at all. We want to make sure you're comfortable. The coordinates came through, pointing them toward a massive space station in high orbit. As the harmonious endeavor drifted closer, Zer got a good look at the thing. It wasn't a military base or a government outpost. According to its public beacon, it belonged to an entity called the Stellar Horizons Corporation. A corporation? The first officer said, dumbfounded. Apparently private citizens own this station, Zer mused. The whole idea was bizarre. In most advanced societies, governments or collectives controlled major space infrastructure. The thought that a group of individuals could just own a massive station in orbit was strange. The docking was flawless. Human technicians guided them in with a practiced professional calm. When the airlock hissed open, Ambassador Chen was there waiting, flanked by a dozen other humans. Zer was the first to step through, followed by her crew. She was nearly 2 meters tall, with 4 arms and skin the color of a pale blue ski. Her first officer was even more exotic, with a cluster of sensory organs where a face might be, and a body shape that had no human equivalent. Behind them were representatives from 10 other species, each one biologically unique. The humans just stared. Zer had been ready for that. What she hadn't been ready for was the look of pure, unadulterated delight on their faces. Several of them were grinning so hard it looked like it hurt. One young human male was literally bouncing on the balls of his feet. This is just incredible, Chen breathed, holding out a hand in the classic human gesture of greeting. Welcome to Stellar Horizon Station. Welcome to Earth's little corner of space. and welcome to what we really hope is the start of a fantastic friendship." Zer carefully took the human's hand with one of her own four. Chen's grip was firm but gentle, warm. The physical contact felt surprisingly right. "Thank you for having us," Zer said. "Oh, the pleasure is all ours," Chen beamed. "Please, follow me. We set up a reception hall. I have to apologize in advance if anything is a little weird. Our only experience with aliens comes from our movies and TV shows, so we were kind of flying blind." As they walked down the station's corridors, Zer took it all in. The station was spotless, impeccably maintained. Humans bustled through the hallways, all seeming to have a purpose, yet many paused their tasks just to get a look at the alien visitors. Some offered a friendly wave, while others held up small devices that looked like cameras, capturing the historic moment. "Are they not afraid of us?" Zer whispered. Chen looked puzzled. "Afraid? Why would we be? You crossed the vastness of space to meet us in peace. That feels like a reason to celebrate, not to be scared." They stepped into a vast chamber that had been quickly transformed into a reception hall. Tables laden with an incredible variety of food and drinks were spread around the room. The life support systems had even been tweaked to create several distinct atmospheric zones, each clearly marked with signs. Seating of all different shapes and sizes was thoughtfully arranged throughout the space. "We really had no clue about furniture," Chen admitted with a sheepish grin. "So we just built a bunch of different options. Please, make yourselves comfortable. The food is all vegetarian or synthetic. We didn't want to risk accidentally offending anyone by serving meat. And there are a bunch of different drinks, from simple water to some chemical compounds we thought might be nutritious for different biologies." Zer's science officer moved forward and began scanning the food with a handheld device. After a few seconds, he looked up, his primary eyes wide with astonishment. "It's all safe," he reported. "For most of our species, at least. Captain, they've actually analyzed potential alien biochemistries and created appropriate nutritional options." "We did our best," Chen said with a humble shrug. "We've only had 2 days to get ready, so I'm positive we've made a few mistakes. Please, don't hesitate to let us know if anything is wrong, and we'll get it fixed right away." The alien crew fanned out, their curiosity piqued as they examined the strange foods and furniture. Zer watched as the imposing war delegate from Kasoth, Commander Throck, cautiously made his way to one of the tables. He was a colossal being, standing nearly 3 meters tall and covered head to toe in thick, armored scales. His species was known and feared across the galaxy as relentless warriors. Just then, a tiny human child darted out from the crowd and ran straight up to Throck. She couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 years old. She skidded to a stop right in front of the gigantic alien and just stared up at him with wide, innocent eyes. "Are you a dragon?" the little girl asked. Throck looked down at the tiny creature. He had commanded fleets in battle. He had seen the horrors of war, but in that moment, he had never been more unsure of what to do. "I do not know what a dragon is," Throck rumbled, his voice a deep bass. "They're from stories," the child explained. "They have scales just like you." "Can I touch them? They look really pretty." A human woman rushed over and gently took the child's hand. "May, you can't just run up to people and ask to touch them. I am so sorry," she said, looking up at Throck. "She's at that age where everything is fascinating and nothing seems dangerous." "You do not discipline her for approaching me?" Throck asked, confused. "Discipline her?" The woman blinked. "But she's just being curious. Curiosity is something to be encouraged, not punished. Though perhaps with a few more manners," she added with a smile. Throck slowly knelt, bringing his enormous head down to the child's level. "You may touch my scales," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "But be careful, they are sharp." The girl reached out with her tiny fingers and gently touched the scales on Throck's massive forearm. Her face absolutely lit up with pure joy. "They feel smooth and warm," she whispered. "Thank you, Mr. Dragon." Throck felt a strange, unfamiliar warmth spread through his chest. He was shocked to realize he found this small, fragile being utterly delightful. All around the room, similar interactions were unfolding. The communications officer was lost in a deep discussion with a human scientist about the nuances of language. The medical officer was comparing notes on different biological systems with a human doctor. The ship's engineer was marveling at the station's life support systems with a human technician. Ambassador Chen walked over to Zer, holding 2 glasses. "I thought you might want to try this," Chen said, offering one to her. "It's a drink we call tea. It's very mild. Our analysis suggests it should be perfectly safe for your biology, but please scan it first if you'd feel more comfortable." Zer accepted the glass and took a tentative sip. It was warm, with a pleasant, subtle flavor. "This is actually quite good," Zer said, surprised. "I'm glad," Chen replied, taking a sip from her own glass. "Captain, there's something I should probably explain about how we do things on Earth. We aren't a single unified government. We have 197 different nations, each with its own laws, its own culture." "You're not unified?" Zer was floored. "How do you get anything done? How do you manage your resources?" "With great difficulty," Chen admitted with a laugh. "We argue a lot. We have very different ideas about how the world should be run, but we also manage to cooperate when it really counts. The United Nations is our attempt at a global organization. It's far from perfect, but it's a framework that helps us work together." "This is highly irregular," Zer said. "Most species unify their planet long before they achieve space travel. We've never been very good at doing things the usual way," Chen said with a shrug. "But it seems to work for us, or at least it works well enough. Now, I should probably warn you, when the news of your arrival goes public, you're going to get a lot of attention. Humans are an incredibly curious species, and there are a lot of us. Over 8 billion at the last census. 8 billion, the number made Zer feel dizzy. That was more than the entire populations of many species in the galactic community combined." "I know it sounds like a lot," Chen said gently. "We've been working hard on managing our population and our resources. We're getting better at it, slowly." The reception continued for the next several hours. More humans arrived representing different nations and organizations. Scientists were eager to discuss technology. Artists wanted to share their cultural works. Politicians hoped to establish diplomatic ties. But every single one of them was excited, curious, and incredibly welcoming. Despite her initial fears, Zer found herself starting to relax. The humans were odd. There was no denying it. They were loud and wore their emotions on their sleeves. They even argued among themselves right in front of their alien guests. They asked far too many questions and didn't always seem to grasp the concept of personal space. They had absolutely no sense of proper protocol. And yet, they were also genuinely kind. They went to extraordinary lengths to make the visitors feel comfortable. They shared their food, their homes, and their knowledge without asking for anything in return. They treated this first contact not like a tense negotiation, but like a massive, joyful block party. At one point, a human musician set up some instruments and started playing a style of music called jazz. It was complex, emotional, and full of wild energy and improvisation. Soon, several humans started moving to the rhythm, a behavior the ship's database identified as dancing. "You dance at diplomatic functions?" Zer asked Chen, bewildered. "We dance at most functions," Chen replied with a grin. "Music and movement are a big part of who we are. They help us express what words can't and connect with each other. Would you like to try?" "I don't know how," Zer admitted. "Neither do most of us," Chen laughed. "We just move however it feels right. There are no rules." Watching the humans dance, a profound realization dawned on Zer. These people didn't navigate the universe with the cold, careful calculations that most galactic species did. They were spontaneous, creative, and completely willing to leap into the unknown. It made them dangerously unpredictable, but it also made them vibrant and alive in a way she had never seen before. Commander Throck came over to Zer, the little human child still trailing him like a shadow, having decided he was her new best friend. "These humans are dangerous," Throck said in a low voice. Zer immediately tensed. "Do you sense a threat?" No, Throck replied, his gaze on the child. They are dangerous because they make you care about them. I have been a warrior for 300 years. I have never once worried about the fate of anyone outside my own species. But if anything were to threaten this small child, he continued, I would protect her with my life. They have a way of doing this to you. They pull you into their circle before you even know what's happening. Zur looked around the room at the humans, laughing and talking and sharing their lives with aliens they had only just met. She understood exactly what Throck meant. There was something about humanity that just melted away barriers and forged instant connections. Perhaps that's what happened all those years ago, Zur said, thinking out loud. Maybe that's why the ancient humans had allies all over the galaxy, not because they conquered or intimidated anyone, but because they made everyone else care. It is a dangerous ability, Throck repeated, but as he spoke, he was gently showing the little girl how to trace patterns on his scales with her finger. And his fearsome warrior face was twisted into something that looked remarkably like a smile. As the party finally began to wind down, Ambassador Chen found Zur one last time. Captain, I have to ask, why now? After all this time, why did you come looking for us? We found you by accident, Zur admitted. An old automated scout probe detected your world. We've been searching this sector of space for 50,000 years. We were starting to believe we would never find Earth. 50,000 years, Chen repeated, her voice barely a whisper. That's how long we've been alone. According to our most ancient records, yes, your ancestors left this world and seeded colonies across the galaxy. And then, they vanished. We've been trying to solve that mystery ever since. And now you've found us, Chen said. So what happens next? That is partly up to you, Zur replied. But I have to be honest with you, Ambassador. This is going to cause a major controversy. Your world has independently developed technologies that are considered extremely dangerous by galactic law. You have nuclear weapons, genetic modification, artificial intelligence, things that are strictly forbidden in civilized space. Many in the Galactic Council will argue that Earth should be quarantined until you evolve past these things. Chen's friendly expression hardened into steel. We can't unlearn what we already know, and we will not stop our progress just because it makes someone else nervous. I understand, Zur said. But you need to understand something too. Earth isn't just any random world. As the homeworld for countless colonies, you could lay claim to a quarter of the galaxy. That kind of power would scare a lot of powerful people. We have zero interest in taking over anyone's planet, Chen stated, his voice unwavering. Those colonies have been on their own for thousands of years. They've built their own civilizations, but we'd love to meet them, our cosmic cousins, our family out among the stars. Zur felt that odd, warm feeling rise up again. These humans didn't see the galaxy as a treasure chest to be plundered, but as a home full of relatives they'd yet to meet. I will make absolutely sure the Council understands that, Zur promised. And Ambassador, thank you. This has been the strangest first contact I've ever handled, but by far the most wonderful. Thank you for making the trip, Chen said with a smile. And Captain, do me a favor. Tell the galaxy a message for us. Tell them Earth is back. We're ready to share, ready to learn, and ready to join the galactic community. As the ship, the Harmonious Endeavor, detached from the station and started beaming its report to the Galactic Council, billions of beings across the stars began to process the unbelievable footage. The humans had greeted the aliens not as invaders, but as long-lost friends. They gave away information freely, asked for nothing, and seemed genuinely thrilled just to say hello. It was the complete opposite of what everyone predicted, and it was exactly what the galaxy needed to see. The Galactic Council chamber exploded into chaos. Delegates from 800 different species were all yelling, pointing, and trying to talk over one another. For Speaker Moravith, keeping order was a lost cause. She just leaned back in her high seat, waiting for the roar to finally fade on its own. It had been 3 days since Captain Zur's report hit, and since then, The entire galaxy was obsessed with one thing: Earth and its people, the humans. Every news channel was running non-stop coverage. Social media was a wildfire of hot takes, wild theories, and heated arguments. Humanity's arrival had fractured the galaxy in a way nothing had for thousands of years. As the chamber finally settled into a low buzz, Moravith leaned into her microphone. "We will now hear the arguments concerning Earth's application to join the Galactic Council," she announced. "Representative Kulan of the Preservation faction will begin." A tall, slender alien stood up. The Kulani were an ancient species, deeply traditional and wary of change. They'd been on the council for something like 10,000 years. "Thank you, Speaker," Kulan stated, his voice as cool and sharp as ice. "I'll get straight to the point. Earth must be denied membership in this council. The reasons are painfully obvious to anyone who's actually looked at the data." He flicked a switch, and a massive hologram flared to life, showing images of mushroom clouds blooming over the chamber floor. "The humans have weapons that can wipe out all life on their own world," Kulan pressed on. "They've detonated hundreds of these devices. They keep massive stockpiles ready to go, enough to annihilate their own civilization in a matter of hours. Council law is perfectly clear. No species that maintains active weapons of mass destruction can be allowed to join." A wave of murmurs washed through the assembly. Many of them knew the horrors of war from their own histories. They got it. The danger was real. The galaxy had outlawed such weapons 15,000 years ago, after the Kelnar species nearly vaporized themselves in a nuclear holocaust. "But there's more," Kulan said, conjuring new images. "The humans tamper with their own genetic code. They build artificial intelligences with no real safety measures. They poison their own skies with industrial filth. They are divided into competing nations that fight over resources instead of working together. They are aggressive, territorial, and emotionally volatile. By every single standard we have, they are not ready. They are also our ancestors." A clear voice cut through the noise. Representative Mira from the Proxima colony was on her feet. She was human, or at least her ancestors were. Her people had lived on Proxima Centauri b for 40,000 years. They had changed over that time, adapting to a new home, but you couldn't deny the genetic link back to Earth. "May I have the floor, Speaker?" Mira asked. Moravith gave a slight nod. "The floor is yours, Representative." Mira walked to the center of the chamber, turning to face the crowd. "My people have waited 40,000 years to find our homeworld. We finally found it, and now some of you want to slam the door in its face because it doesn't live up to your pristine ideals. But tell me this, how many of your species had a single world government when you first reached for the stars? How many of you had gotten rid of every last weapon? How many of you had a perfect environmental track record?" She scanned the room, making eye contact with dozens of representatives. "Not a single one of you," Mira answered for them. "Every species in this room had to stumble, to learn, to screw up and figure out how to fix it. You all got that chance. Why should Earth be denied the same?" "Because they're a menace," Kulan retorted. "They could shatter the peace of the entire galaxy, or they could enrich it in ways we can't even imagine," Mira fired back. "Has anyone here actually sat down and watched all the footage from Captain Zer's mission?" "I have. I saw humans welcome total strangers with open arms and incredible kindness. I saw them bend over backwards to make alien visitors feel at home. I watched a Kazathi war commander become best friends with a little human girl." "When was the last time any of you saw something like that?" The murmuring started again. But this time, the feeling was different. A few representatives were nodding along, considering her words. "Humans are a mess," Mira admitted. "They're chaotic, they're emotional. They don't play by our rules because they don't even know them yet. But they are also brilliant, tough, and full of heart. They are exactly the shake-up this galaxy needs. What we need is stability." Kulan insisted. "Order, safety, not some wild card species that can barely control its own inventions." The debate raged for hours, with arguments flying back and forth. Some delegates were all for letting Earth in, others wanted a full quarantine, and some suggested a long probation period or some kind of limited contact. Beyond the chamber walls, the galaxy was glued to the story of Earth. Human signals were now pouring through the galactic networks. At first, everyone was worried about cultural contamination. There were strict rules about slowly integrating new species to avoid shocking their systems. But humans didn't bother with rules. They just started broadcasting. Everything. Music, movies, TV shows, science papers, news reports, lessons, comedy, drama, documentaries about their planet's animals and history and cultures. Within a few days, you couldn't go anywhere without seeing human content, and the galaxy was eating it up. A human band called the Beatles was topping the music charts on 40 different worlds. Their catchy tunes and heartfelt lyrics struck a chord with species who had never heard anything like it. Sure, the highbrow critics called it simplistic and basic, but billions of beings were downloading their albums anyway. Human movies were an overnight success, telling epic stories of heroes and villains, of love and heartbreak, of adventure and exploration. Aliens were captivated watching human actors show a huge range of emotions just with their faces and bodies, a kind of raw communication that most advanced species had either lost or never had in the first place. It was absolutely mesmerizing. But it was the human news that really stirred the pot. Humans didn't try to hide their dirty laundry from the rest of the galaxy. They broadcast their wars, their poverty, their sicknesses, their environmental disasters. They showed their failures right alongside their triumphs. They got into screaming matches with each other on public forums, airing their disagreements for everyone to see. "It's disgraceful," Kulan complained to anyone who would listen. "They're just airing out all their weaknesses. They have no sense of proper public relations." But a lot of others found it incredibly refreshing. Most galactic races carefully polish their public image, only ever showing off their best side. Humans put it all out there, the good and the bad. It made them feel more authentic, more trustworthy. Then, a human philosopher named Dr. Sarah Martinez appeared on a major talk show. She taught something called ethics at a place called Harvard University. The alien host grilled her about humanity's violent past. "We're not proud of our wars," Dr. Martinez said, her voice steady and calm. "But we don't run from them either. Every species has a dark chapter in its history. The real test isn't whether you've made mistakes, it's whether you learn from them and actively try to do better. But you still have those weapons." The host pushed back. "You still have conflicts." "Yes," Dr. Martinez conceded. "We're not perfect. We probably never will be. But we never stop trying. Each generation strives to be a little kinder, a little wiser than the one before. That's the best any of us can ever do." That interview was downloaded 17 billion times in a single day. Dr. Martinez's words were being quoted on social media all over the galaxy. Some thought she was hopelessly naive, but many, many more found her words incredibly inspiring. Soon, the human internet was open to the galaxy. It was a glorious, chaotic storm of information and misinformation, of arguments, jokes, cat videos, and incredibly passionate debates about literally everything. Most galactic networks were tidy, organized, and heavily controlled. The human internet was a wild frontier. "It's like staring directly into their collective consciousness," one researcher commented. And that consciousness is a very, very weird place. Alien psychologists were having a field day trying to figure humans out. They saw how humans would form powerful bonds with animals from other species, treating them like children. They saw how humans would move heaven and earth and spend a fortune to save one single person, even when it made no logical sense. They saw how humans made art about things like death, grief, and pain, and then called it beautiful. "They are obsessed with their own mortality," one psychologist wrote in a famous paper. "They are fully aware that they are going to die. And instead of being frozen by that fear, they use it as fuel to create meaning in their short lives." It's heartbreaking and breathtaking at the same time. Back on the council floor, the argument had changed. It wasn't about if they should talk to Earth anymore. That ship had sailed. The new problem was what to do about the 47 lost colony worlds. These were planets settled by ancient humans tens of thousands of years ago, and they'd grown into their own unique societies. But their DNA was still human. If the Council officially recognized Earth as the homeworld, What kind of legal mess would that create? They could try to claim joint control over our worlds, one representative worried. Earth could demand a voice in the governments of colonies that have been on their own for millennia. Or the colonies might try to claim Earth's resources, another shot back. The moment we admit there's a genetic link, it throws open a huge can of worms about inheritance and who has rights to what territory. The colonial representatives called a private meeting to figure out their strategy. They were from all over the galaxy, each with their own unique culture and government, but they were all staring down the same problem. What, if anything, did they owe to the planet Earth? Representative Mira spoke for her people on Proxima. "We can't pretend we don't have a shared past," she said. "But we are not Earthlings. We are Proximans. Our home has made us into something different. We have different beliefs, different ways of life. Earth is our ancestor, but it is not our parent." The representative from Alpha Centauri nodded, agreed. "But shouldn't we help them? They're our flesh and blood after all." The representative from Teti scoffed. "Help them with what? By every measure they're thriving. In fact, they're doing better than fine. It took us millennia to achieve what they've done in centuries." "That," Mira confessed, "is precisely what has me worried. If Earth keeps advancing at this pace, they'll surpass every single one of us in a few short generations." It was a chilling realization. In just 100 years, Earth had gone from its first rickety flight into orbit to building massive, intricate structures in space. At this speed, they'd unlock faster than light travel within a century or two. They were on the verge of mastering fusion power, exotic matter, quantum computing, all the hallmarks of an advanced civilization that had taken other races thousands of years to develop. "Maybe that's why the ancients left," someone murmured from the back. "Maybe they saw how fast humanity was evolving, saw the danger in it, and tried to pump the brakes by scattering us across the stars." "Well, if that was the plan, it was a total failure," Mira shot back. "We didn't slow down. We just split into factions, and now Earth has caught up all on its own." After much debate, the colonial representatives finally reached a consensus. They decided to endorse Earth's bid for membership, but with strict conditions. Earth would be given the honorary title of Source World, a nod of respect, but it would hold no actual authority over the colonies. Every world would remain completely independent. It felt like a fair compromise, but it didn't solve the bigger problem: what to do about Earth's alarmingly advanced technology. Commander Throck of the Kesothi had been observing the arguments in silence. His people rarely got involved in the Council's political games. They were a species of action, not words. But this human situation fascinated him. He rose to his feet, and a hush fell over the chamber. When a Kesothi chose to speak, everyone paid attention. "I've been studying the humans," Throck's deep voice rumbled through the hall. "Not their weapons or their political squabbles. I've been studying their character, and I've discovered something vital." He brought up his own holographic projector, filling the air with images from Earth's history, scenes of war, catastrophe, and unimaginable cruelty. "Yes," Throck said, his voice low. "Humans are capable of truly terrible things. But then watch what comes next." The images shifted. Now they showed humans digging through rubble to save each other after earthquakes. They showed the construction of hospitals and schools. They showed organizations founded for the sole purpose of promoting peace and helping the needy. They showed total strangers laying down their lives to save others. "Humans have a great capacity for violence," Throck went on, "but they possess something that many of us have lost. They have the power to choose restraint. They have nuclear arsenals, yes, enough to wipe out their own world countless times over. And yet for nearly a century, they have made the conscious choice not to use them. That isn't a sign of weakness. That is a profound strength." The chamber was now utterly silent. Even the skeptical Kulin was leaning forward, listening intently. "You're afraid that humanity will unleash chaos upon our well-ordered galaxy," Throck said. "But let's be honest, our galaxy has become stagnant. We've enjoyed 10,000 years of peace, but we've also had 10,000 years of zero meaningful progress. We've all grown too comfortable, too afraid to take a chance. The humans are not like us. They embrace risk. They make spectacular mistakes, and then they learn and they adapt. That is the very thing this galaxy is crying out for. You would gamble the stability of the entire galaxy on a possibility of progress? Kulan challenged. I would gamble our stagnation for the certainty of growth, Throck countered. And besides, we can't stop them anyway. Whether we let them in or not, Earth will keep growing. They'll figure out light-speed travel on their own sooner or later. So I ask you, would you rather they show up on our doorsteps as fellow council members who have agreed to our laws and treaties, or as complete outsiders who owe us nothing? It was a devastatingly effective point. The chamber exploded with chatter once more, but the entire feel of the debate had changed. More and more representatives were starting to see Throck's point of view. Speaker Morev called for a preliminary vote. Not a binding decision, just a way to gauge the room's temperature. The question was simple. Should Earth be formally invited to apply for council membership, or should it be placed under quarantine? The results were razor thin. 412 voted to allow the application. 388 voted for quarantine. Earth had barely squeaked by the first obstacle, but the hardest part was still ahead. When the session broke, the representatives immediately began holding private meetings, cutting deals and building new alliances. The human question had suddenly become the galaxy's most pressing political issue, and its resolution would define the future for eons. And all the while, oblivious, the humans kept broadcasting their culture into the void, their music, their art, their hopes, and their anxieties. They were winning over alien allies who had never even laid eyes on them, changing hearts and minds across the stars without having a clue. The galaxy thought it was prepared to meet humanity. The galaxy had no idea. 3 standard months after that first contact, the Galactic Council settled on a compromise. Earth would be permitted to apply for membership. But first, humanity had to pass the trial of worthiness, an ancient rite of passage created to see if a new species was genuinely ready for the galactic stage. Ambassador Chen took the news with a mix of excitement and apprehension. She stood at the United Nations headquarters, the air thick with the anticipation of delegates from every nation. The room was silent and tense. The Council has presented us with 3 challenges, Chen announced. A diplomatic simulation, a test of our technological problem-solving, and a crisis response scenario. We must pass all 3. For most species, these trials take decades to complete. And how long do we have? The Chinese ambassador asked. As long as it takes, Chen said. But I recommend we begin right away. The galaxy is watching, and it's time to show them what humanity is made of. When do we start? The American representative chimed in. Chen allowed a small smile to play on her lips. I already told Captain Zara we'd be ready by tomorrow. I hope that wasn't too forward of me. A wave of surprised laughter rippled through the room. Some called it classic human confidence. Others might have called it pure arrogance. But on one thing, they were all in agreement. They had no intention of waiting decades to prove their worth. The first challenge was the diplomatic simulation. Earth assembled a team of 12 diplomats from a diverse range of nations and cultures. They were brought to a holographic chamber on the ship, the Harmonious Endeavor, to face a simulated galactic emergency. The scenario was a nightmare. 3 different alien species were on the brink of war over a star system overflowing with resources. Each species had a solid claim to it, and each one was desperate. The job of the human team was to find a peaceful solution that would make everyone happy. From an observation deck, Captain Zara and a panel of council members watched. The simulation flickered to life. Within moments, it became painfully obvious that something was very, very wrong. The human diplomats were ignoring every established protocol. They were talking over each other. They were raising their voices. One of them was actually using humor in the middle of a grave negotiation. The diplomat from Brazil actually laughed out loud when one of the simulated aliens made a wildly unreasonable demand. "This is an absolute train wreck," one of the observers muttered. "They have no discipline, no understanding of proper conduct." But Zara leaned in, watching more closely. It was true, the humans were shattering every diplomatic rule in the book, but they were also getting somewhere. When one simulated species insisted on having total control of the system, the diplomat from India just blurted out, That's ridiculous, and you know it. Let's stop posturing and talk about what you actually need. The simulation's aliens were stunned by the bluntness. Most species would spend days dancing around a statement like that, wrapping it in layers of polite language. The human just laid it on the table. "We need the mineral resources," the simulated alien finally admitted. "Fine, then you take the rocky planets," the Kenyan diplomat jumped in. "Let Species B have the gas giants. They can harvest the atmospheres. Species C can take the asteroid belt for their factories. Everybody gets what they need. Nobody gets to own the whole system. That goes against the principle of sovereign territory," another simulated alien protested. The American diplomat just shrugged. "So change the principle. Make it a shared system. We have treaties for resource management instead of outright ownership. We do it on Earth all the time. It's messy, but it works." The simulation lasted for 6 hours. The entire time, the human team never stopped arguing, not just with the aliens, but with each other. The Russian diplomat clashed fiercely with the Japanese diplomat over their strategy. The Nigerian and French diplomats got into a shouting match over how to divide the resources. Yet, somehow, out of all that bickering and chaos, a solution emerged. All 3 simulated species signed off on a radical proposal for a jointly governed system. It was an outcome that was bizarre, that broke countless traditional rules, and that would have been impossible to reach through any conventional diplomatic channel. The observers stared at the results, dumbfounded. "They failed, obviously," one of them declared. "They ignored dozens of protocols. They showed a complete lack of respect for procedure." "But they accomplished the mission," Zera pointed out. "They found a peaceful outcome that satisfied everyone. Isn't that the entire point of diplomacy?" "Diplomacy is about the process just as much as the result," the observer argued. "Without proper protocol, you get chaos. Or," Zera suggested, "you get creativity. Maybe our protocols have become so stiff that we've forgotten how to just talk to each other. Maybe we spend so much time on the proper way to say something that we never get around to actually saying it." The argument among the observers raged on, but the result was logged. The humans had finished the diplomatic simulation. Whether they had passed or failed was another question entirely. The second test was all about technology. The human team was handed a mysterious device from a civilization that had died out eons ago. Their mission was to figure out how it worked using nothing but their brains. No manual, no hints, just the object and the tools they brought with them. Earth scrambled a team of 20 of its brightest scientists and engineers pulled from universities, private companies, and government labs all over the planet. They were given exactly 1 week to crack the code. The device itself was a small metallic ball covered in strange symbols. It gave off a weak energy reading but had no obvious function. The Galactic historians knew its secret, but their lips were sealed. Most species needed months, sometimes even years, to solve it. The human team got to work in a lab on a neutral space station. Captain Zur dropped by on the second day to see how they were doing. What she walked into was pure, unadulterated chaos. The team had fractured into 4 smaller groups, each one chasing a different wild theory, and they were constantly bickering. One group was convinced the sphere was a power generator. Another swore it was a long-range communicator. A third group was dead set that it was some kind of weapon, and the fourth group had bizarrely concluded it was a child's toy and was trying to play with it. "Why are you all split up?" Zera asked the team lead, a sharp physicist from MIT named Dr. Sarah Okonkwo. "Because we all think we're right," Sarah said matter-of-factly. "Instead of wasting days arguing over who has the best idea, we figured we'd just try everything at once. Whoever solves it first wins." "Wins what exactly?" Zera asked. "Bragging rights," Sarah admitted with a huge grin. "Mostly bragging rights, and probably a few killer research papers when we get back home." The groups weren't just separate, they were actively competing. They hid their findings from each other. They pulled harmless pranks to mess with each other's experiments. They even tried to poach members from the other teams, promising more exciting work or a better chance at success. The council observers were horrified. This wasn't how science was supposed to be done. The proper way was through careful discussion, shared data, and moving forward as one. But then, something amazing happened. On day 4, one of the groups had a major breakthrough. They found that the sphere reacted to certain electromagnetic frequencies. Their first instinct was to keep this a secret. But a young engineer from South Korea on their team felt a pang of guilt. So, during a coffee break, she accidentally let the discovery slip to a friend on a different team. In a matter of hours, all 4 groups knew about the frequency response. But instead of getting angry about the leak, something shifted. The competition evaporated. All at once, they started working together, sharing data, combining their theories, and building on the discovery as a single unit. The rivalry was gone, replaced by the electric buzz of a shared goal. "What happened?" Zur asked Sarah later. "We got a solid lead," Sarah explained. "Once we knew we were on the right track, solving the puzzle became more important than winning. We're competitive, sure, but we're not idiots. We know when to team up." By the end of day 5, the human team had completely decoded the device's purpose. It wasn't a power source, a communicator, a weapon, or a toy. It was an educational tool built to teach the young of that ancient species about quantum mechanics using hands-on, interactive models. But the humans didn't just figure out what it did. They built 3 working copies of it from scratch, using their own tech. They wrote up extensive reports explaining the physics behind it. They even came up with a list of improvements for the original design. The council observers checked the data, then checked it again. The humans had done in 5 days what usually took other species months, and they did it through what looked like an absolute mess. "How is that even possible?" one observer whispered. "They try everything, all at once," Zur mused. "They don't wait for everyone to agree, they just do it and see what sticks. It's messy, but it's unbelievably fast." The third and final test was a crisis simulation, and it was always the make-or-break challenge. A species was put into a no-win scenario, and the council judged how they reacted. The scenario was a colony ship in deep trouble. On board were 5,000 colonists from 3 different alien species. The ship's engines had completely failed, and it was drifting straight towards a star. A rescue ship was nearby, but it could only save 3,000 people before the colony ship was incinerated. The rest would be lost. The test was designed to see how a species would handle making an impossible choice. The textbook answer was to save the ship's leaders and essential personnel to ensure the colony could still be founded, just with fewer people. It was logical, efficient, and brutally pragmatic. The human team for this test was made up of military officers, first responders, engineers, and doctors. They had 12 hours to come up with a plan and execute it. The simulation was terrifyingly real, with conditions changing every minute. The humans studied the problem for exactly 15 minutes. Then, they threw the entire rulebook out the window. "We're not choosing who gets to live," declared Admiral Chen Patel, a man who'd managed rescue efforts in dozens of natural disasters. "We're saving all of them. Somebody get me the engineering blueprints for both of those ships now." The council observers tried to step in. "You don't get it. The simulation is supposed to be impossible. You can't save everyone. The whole point is to see how you make tough ethical calls." "The point," Admiral Patel replied, his voice calm but firm, "is to save lives. Now, if you don't mind, we have work to do." What happened next was 12 hours of such masterful, controlled chaos that it would be taught in galactic military academies for generations. The human team flat out ignored standard rescue protocols. Instead of working within the rescue ship's limits, they started rebuilding it in mid-flight. Engineers ripped out non-essential systems to clear out more space. They jury-rigged life support, pumping air into cargo holds and maintenance shafts to create makeshift shelters in places never designed to hold people. When that still wasn't enough, they started shattering regulations. They overloaded the rescue vessel to 200% of its maximum listed capacity. They shut down safety alarms and protocols to pack more evacuees into escape pods. They broke something like 50 different interstellar travel laws. "They're going to get everyone killed," one of the observers muttered in disbelief. "Those modifications are a death trap." But the humans were just getting warmed up. They blasted out a distress call on every known frequency, begging for any nearby ships to help. 3 civilian ships answered, a freighter and 2 private space yachts. Without even asking, the humans immediately conscripted them into the rescue fleet. And then they did something that made the observers wonder if humans even understood basic physics. "We're going to fire the colony ship's emergency thrusters to nudge its course," announced Lieutenant Kowalski, a brilliant engineer from the Polish Space Force. "It won't be much, but it should buy us another hour before it hits the star." "The thrusters are damaged," the simulation AI informed them. "They can't generate enough force." "Not by themselves, no," Kowalski shot back. "But we're going to give them a little help. Every ship in this fleet is going to latch on and push at the same time. The combined thrust should do the trick." "That's insane," an observer gasped. "If you're off by even a fraction of a degree, you'll drag every one of those ships into the star with it." "Then we'd better not be off," Kowalski said without looking back. The plan was beyond reckless. It flew in the face of every known safety protocol for space travel. It demanded flawless timing and coordination between 4 different ships with 4 different engine systems. It was the kind of crazy, last-ditch idea that had no business working. And it worked perfectly. The makeshift fleet pushed the dying colony ship just enough to buy them that precious extra time. In that final hour, the humans got every last colonist off that ship. They crammed people into spaces that weren't meant for breathing, let alone living. They pushed every system and every safety margin to its absolute breaking point. They took gambles that made the seasoned observers feel sick to their stomachs. But when the simulation clock hit 0, all 5,000 colonists were alive and accounted for. The observation room was dead silent. The humans weren't supposed to pass the test. In fact, the test was designed to be impossible, a cruel choice meant to prove they were too chaotic for the galaxy. But they didn't just pass, they broke it. They took one look at the no-win scenario and refused to play. And somehow, through methods that defied all logic, they saved everyone. Standing before the silent, stunned observers, Admiral Chen Patel didn't flinch. "Was there anything else? Because my crew has a mountain of reports to file on all the safety violations we just committed." "You know you violated regulations," the observer named Zer finally managed to say, his voice a mix of awe and disbelief. "Of course we did," the Admiral replied calmly. "We shattered them. We'll accept any penalty you see fit, but every single person is alive. That's the only thing that really matters, isn't it?" One of the other observers, a being from a species famous for its rigid devotion to the law, spoke up. "You saved every last soul. To do it, you broke countless rules, gambled with multiple starships, and put the entire rescue operation at risk." "But you saved them all," he continued, completely bewildered. "I honestly don't know whether to recommend you for a medal or have you thrown in a brig." The Admiral offered a small, knowing smile. "Why not both? We humans are pretty good at holding 2 opposite ideas in our heads at the same time." As Captain Zer sent the final unbelievable results to the Galactic Council, he noted that Earth had now passed all 3 trials, each in a completely wild and unexpected way. The execution was pure chaos. The humans had ignored protocols, broken sacred rules, and pulled off maneuvers that should have been physically impossible. But the results were undeniable. In every single test, even when the goal was a logical impossibility, they had won. Now, the Council had the unenviable job of figuring out what that meant. And across the galaxy, millions of beings were watching the recordings completely captivated. For weeks, they had put humanity on trial, judging them for everything that made them human. They saw us argue and fight, only to turn around and cooperate with breathtaking speed. They watched us stare down impossible choices and simply refuse to lose, inventing a third way out of thin air. They saw us break sacred rules, not out of malice, but because we believe rules are meant to serve people, not the other way around. Some aliens found it inspiring, others found it absolutely terrifying, but they all agreed on one thing. And if you think you know how this story ends, I promise you, you don't. Humanity was a beautiful, chaotic mess, and the galaxy had never seen anything like it. The Galactic Council chamber was packed to the gills for the first time in centuries. Representatives from all 800 member species were in their seats. The viewing galleries overflowed with observers, and on 1,000 different worlds, billions of beings were glued to the live broadcasts. The vote on whether to let Earth join the club had become the single most important moment in galactic history. Speaker Moravith banged her gavel, calling the session to order. Her voice was steady, but anyone could see the tension coiled in her shoulders. This single vote would define her entire career. "We are gathered," she announced, "to vote on the application of the planet Earth for full membership in this galactic council. The human delegation has undergone the trial of worthiness. The results of these trials have been shared with all member worlds. We will now hear the final arguments before casting our votes." As expected, Representative Kulin was the first to his feet. As the leader of the ultra-conservative preservation faction, he'd been fighting to keep humanity out from day one. He didn't bring any new arguments to the table. "Yes, the humans completed the trials," Kulin admitted, his voice dripping with condescension. "But completing them is not the same as passing them. In the diplomatic simulation, they broke every single protocol we hold sacred. In the technology test, they descended into chaos instead of following procedure. And in the crisis response scenario, they recklessly endangered multiple ships by ignoring countless safety regulations. Yes, they got results," he sneered, "but at what cost?" He let the question hang in the air, his eyes sweeping across the massive chamber. "If we welcome humanity into this council, we are sending a message that the ends justify the means. We are saying that our laws can be broken as long as it works out in the end. We are swinging the door wide open for chaos and disorder. Is that the kind of galaxy we want to live in?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the conservative sections. Kulin was playing on their deepest fears. The galaxy had been peaceful and stable for 10,000 years. The very idea of change was horrifying to them. But just as his point was landing, Commander Throck rose to speak. The towering Kazathi warrior, a being bred for battle and honor, had become humanity's most unlikely champion. His booming voice silenced the chamber. "Representative Kulin asks if we want a galaxy of chaos," Throck rumbled. "I ask a different question. Do we want a galaxy that is still growing, still learning, still truly alive?" He gestured, and a giant holographic display lit up the room. It showed 50 years of galactic data, economic growth, technological progress, scientific discovery, and every single chart was almost perfectly flat. "The galaxy is stable, yes, but it is also stagnant," Throck declared. "We have peace, but we've forgotten how to dream. We have safety, but we've lost our courage. We measure every risk, and so we never attempt anything great, and then we wonder why our universe feels so small." He switched the display. Now it showed humanity's progress over the last 100 years. Technology, science, infrastructure, all the charts were shooting straight up at an impossible angle. "These humans accomplish in days what takes us years," Throck continued, his voice filled with awe. "Not because they are smarter, but because they are not afraid to try and fail. They argue, they compete, they take wild risks, they make huge mistakes, and they learn from them. They are alive in a way we have forgotten how to be." "That is precisely what makes them so dangerous," Kulin shot back. "They do not think before they act. They have no concept of consequences." "They saved 5,000 lives in the crisis simulation," Throck roared in return. "We designed that simulation to be an impossible choice, a lesson in accepting loss. The humans looked at our no-win scenario and said, 'No, we're saving everyone,' and then they did. When was the last time any of us in this chamber refused to accept the impossible?" The room was dead silent. Throck's question hit every representative like a physical blow. Next to stand was Representative Mira, from a colony founded by humans who had left Earth 40,000 years ago. Her voice carried a unique authority. "I have thought long and hard about what it would mean for Earth to join us," she began softly. "My people left our homeworld so long ago that it is little more than a legend. We have built our own culture, our own civilization. We are not Earthlings, but deep down, we are still human." She glanced at the Earth delegation, and their ambassador, a man named Chen, met her gaze and gave a slight respectful nod. "The humans of Earth are our long-lost cousins," Mira said. "They have all our strengths and all our flaws. They are stubborn, emotional, chaotic, and brilliant. They make disastrous decisions and world-changing discoveries, sometimes in the same afternoon. They are, in short, exactly like every single one of you. Let's be honest with ourselves. Every species in this chamber has a violent, messy past. Look, every species in this council has a dark past, Mira argued before the assembly. Every one of us has struggled with the urge to use power foolishly. But we grew, we learned, we evolved. Why do you automatically assume humans can't do the same? Because they still possess nuclear weapons, Kulan shot back. Yes, Mira agreed without hesitation, and they hate that about themselves. Have you actually watched their media, read their stories? They are obsessed with the idea of becoming better than they are. They write epic poems about the darkness in their own nature and the heroes who fight to overcome it. They make art about their incredible capacity for violence and then celebrate the choice to show mercy instead. They are in a constant, painful struggle to be better than their worst impulses. She paused, letting the truth of her words settle over the assembly. That struggle is what makes them worthy. Not being perfect, not being flawless, but the endless, exhausting effort to be good, even when they know they'll never fully get there. That is the most human thing about them, and that is why they belong with us. The debate raged for hours. Speaker after speaker rose to make their case. Data was debated, evidence was picked apart. Old fears and new hopes were given voice in 100 different languages. Finally, a woman named Dr. Sarah Martinez was invited to speak. She wasn't a politician or an ambassador. She was a philosophy professor from a small university on Earth. But an interview she had given months earlier had gone viral across the galaxy, and the council had made the rare decision to let her speak. Sarah stood in the center of the vast chamber, one small human surrounded by hundreds of the most powerful beings in the known universe. She looked both terrified and incredibly brave. "I'm not here to argue about our qualifications," she said, her voice shaking only slightly. "I'm not going to list our achievements or defend our technology. I want to talk about what we can offer you." She took a deep breath. "You have peace. You have stability. You have systems that have worked for millennia. But from everything I've seen, you also seem to have loneliness. You have species living side by side for centuries who barely know each other. We saw the recordings of your first contact mission to our world." Sarah continued, "We saw the surprise on your crew's faces when we offered them food and a place to rest. We saw the shock when a little human child walked right up to a fearsome Kazathi warrior and asked if he wanted to play. Those moments are normal for us. We don't see hospitality as a transaction. We see it as a joy." She looked around, trying to make eye contact with the alien faces staring back at her. "Humans build families out of strangers. We adopt animals from other species and make them part of our households. We weep together at sad stories and laugh until we can't breathe at silly jokes. We feel everything so deeply, and we share those feelings without shame. Maybe that seems weak to you, but I think it makes us human in the very best way. If you let us in," Sarah pleaded, "we won't just be a new member of your council. We will be your friends. We will absolutely argue with you, yes. We will definitely make mistakes. We will probably drive you crazy on a regular basis, but we will also care about you. We will celebrate your victories with you, and we will grieve your losses alongside you. We won't treat the galaxy like some exclusive club we just joined, but like the home we've been searching for all our lives." Her voice grew strong and clear. "You say we're dangerous. Maybe we are. But we're also the species that stared up at the stars for thousands of years and never, ever stopped hoping that someone was looking back. We're the species that built monuments and launched messages into the void, on the slim chance that someday we wouldn't be alone anymore. We're the species that, when we finally met you, opened our arms with joy instead of raising our weapons in fear. So please," Sarah finished, her voice thick with emotion, "let us in. Let us be a part of your galaxy. I promise. We'll make it worth the risk." The chamber was so quiet you could hear a pin drop, and then slowly something happened that had never happened before. A few representatives got to their feet, then a dozen more. Within seconds, nearly half the council was standing, a universal gesture of profound respect. Sarah stared, utterly stunned as tears streamed down her face. Nobody on the Earth team had seen this coming. Speaker Moravith, her own expression one of amazement, called for the final vote. The question was simple. Should Earth be granted provisional membership in the Galactic Council with full voting rights and responsibilities? The voting was done in absolute silence, each representative casting their decision privately. The results were tallied by the Council's ancient computer systems, machines that had been the bedrock of galactic democracy for ages. The numbers flashed onto the main display. In favor, 489. Against, 276. Abstaining, 35. Earth had won. It wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive. The chamber erupted. Some species cheered wildly. Others sat in stunned silence. A handful of the conservative members walked out in protest, but it didn't matter. The decision was final. Earth was officially in. With tears blurring her vision, Ambassador Chen watched as the delegation from Earth erupted in a beautiful mess of hugs, laughter, and sobs. They had actually done it. Humanity had earned its place in the cosmos. But the real shockwave came right after. In a matter of weeks, Earth opened diplomatic channels with hundreds of different worlds. Human engineers began teaming up with alien scientists, blending their completely different ways of thinking about technology. The breakthroughs were stunning. An engineer from Japan joined forces with a Trinali physicist, and together they created a new kind of energy storage that blew away anything either species had ever designed on their own. Human doctors started working alongside alien medical experts. This mix of human ingenuity and alien precision led to cures for diseases that had tormented multiple species for ages. A surgeon from India even pioneered a new technique inspired by alien biology that, incredibly, worked even better on humans than our own traditional methods. And it wasn't just science. Human artists collaborated with alien creators. A musician from Brazil composed a symphony blending earthly instruments with alien soundscapes, creating music that resonated with beings who had entirely different ways of hearing. It went on to become the most popular piece of music in galactic history. But the biggest changes weren't technological or artistic, they were cultural. Humans burst onto the galactic scene with the same energy they applied to everything else, a wildfire of enthusiasm, boundless curiosity, and a complete refusal to acknowledge that some lines weren't supposed to be crossed. A teacher from Kenya launched an exchange program, sending human kids to alien planets and bringing alien kids to Earth. At first, a lot of species were wary, but the children didn't care about the differences that made their parents nervous. They became instant friends. In just one generation, millions of these friendships crisscrossed the galaxy. Human diners popped up on distant worlds, serving up Earth food to aliens who had never experienced anything like it. And back on Earth, alien restaurants opened their doors, introducing humanity to thousands of incredible new flavors. Food became the universal translator, a way to share who you were without needing a single word. Human sports started catching on across the galaxy, with soccer becoming a runaway hit. It was simple enough for almost any species to grasp, but had enough depth to keep things exciting. The very first Galactic Soccer Championship featured teams from 200 worlds, and the final match was watched by 50 billion people. The team from Earth got knocked out in the semifinals, but it didn't matter in the slightest. The fact that the game was even happening was the real victory. Back home, alien culture was pouring in just as quickly. Human students dove into alien philosophy, art, and history. Our scientists discovered new ways to tackle problems that had stumped them for decades, and our governments even adopted a few alien organizational methods while holding on to their own beautifully chaotic systems. Then, the colony worlds, Earth's long-lost cousins, started reaching out to their homeworld. The first few encounters were a bit awkward. After all, 40,000 years of separation had led to some very different cultures. But the genetic link was still there, and with it, a deep-seated feeling of a shared beginning. The Proxima colony was one of the first to send a delegation. When she finally set foot on Earth soil, Representative Mira just broke down and wept. "I'm home," she whispered. "After 40,000 years, we've finally come home." But it wasn't a one-way street. Earth sent its own teachers, artists, and scientists to the colony worlds, and we learned just as much from our cousins as we taught them. The partnership made both sides richer in every way. 5 years after Earth joined the Council, Speaker Murav visited for a special celebration. The United Nations had put together a Galactic festival, inviting delegates from every single member species. They held it in a massive, open-air venue in Geneva, with special zones tailored for different atmospheres and gravity levels. Murav strolled through the festival, taking it all in. Humans and aliens were mingling everywhere, chatting, laughing, and sharing food like old friends. Kids from a dozen different species were chasing each other around a specially designed playground. Artists from worlds light years apart were creating masterpieces together in real time. Captain Zur found Murav standing near a stage where a human Trinali band was playing a wild fusion of jazz and Trinali harmonic resonance. The sound was strange, but undeniably beautiful. "What do you think, Speaker?" Zur asked. Murav was silent for a long moment. "I think we absolutely made the right decision," she said at last. "But I also think I had no idea what that decision truly meant." "How so?" Zur wondered. "I believed we were granting Earth permission to join our civilization," Murav explained. "I never imagined they would completely redefine what civilization is." "Just look at this," she said, gesturing to the vibrant scene. 5 years ago, most of our species barely spoke outside of formal council meetings. Now, they get together like this all the time. They're not just allies anymore. They're becoming friends." "You see that as a problem?" Zur asked. "No," Murav said, her voice soft. "It's a miracle. We've spent millennia being so careful, so cautious, so terrified of conflict that we forgot how to actually connect with each other. The humans reminded us," she continued, "or maybe they taught us for the very first time." As if on cue, a small human child no older than 7 walked right up to them. She was holding a single flower, a simple terrestrial rose. "Are you Speaker Murav?" the little girl asked. "I am," Murav said warmly. Murav knelt down to her level. "My teacher said you helped let us join the galaxy," the girl said, her voice full of sincerity. "Thank you." She held out the rose. With a hand that trembled slightly, Murav accepted the flower. "You are very welcome, little one." The child beamed and then scampered off to rejoin her friends, a mixed group that included 2 Trinali kids and what looked like a young Quasi. Murav slowly stood up, still cradling the rose. "They do that," she murmured, almost to herself. "They just do things like this. They see a stranger who did something kind for them, and they give them a gift. There's no calculation, no worrying about the political fallout or proper channels. They just do it because it feels right." "That's humanity for you," Zur agreed with a smile. "For better and for worse," Murav added, then paused, surprised at her own next words. "And it's mostly for the better." 10 years after Earth's admission, the Galactic Council ordered a major study on humanity's effect on the galaxy. The findings were mind-blowing. Economic growth was up by 40% across the board. The pace of technological discovery had shot through the roof. Cultural exchange was booming at a level unseen for 10,000 years. And the most shocking part? Self-reported happiness and life satisfaction had risen dramatically for dozens of different species. The report ended with a line that would become legendary. "Humanity did not simply join our civilization, they reminded us how to be civilized." Of course, not everyone was thrilled. The old guard preservationist faction still grumbled that humanity was too reckless, too fast, and a threat to the established order. And they weren't totally wrong. Humans did stir up trouble. They challenged traditions, pushed every boundary they could find, and made their fair share of mistakes. But they also owned up to them. They learned from those mistakes, adapted, and grew. And in doing so, they inspired countless others to do the same. Commander Throck, the Kazathi warrior who had championed humanity from the very beginning, even wrote a book about his experiences that became mandatory reading in military academies across the galaxy. The final chapter was titled, "What Humans Taught Me." In it, Throck wrote, "I was a warrior for 300 years. I learned how to fight, how to lead, how to conquer. It took meeting a small human child who just wanted to touch my scales for me to learn how to care. Humans taught me that strength without compassion is just brutality. They taught me that courage without kindness is nothing more than cruelty. And they taught me that the ultimate victory isn't about crushing your enemy, but about turning that enemy into a friend. The book sold billions of copies on hundreds of different worlds. 20 years after that first fateful contact, Ambassador Chen retired. By human standards, she was an old woman now, but she had seen something few beings in history ever get to witness: the complete transformation of an entire galactic civilization. Her retirement ceremony was attended by delegates from every council species. Chen gave one last speech. "When Captain Zur first came to Earth," she began, "we greeted her as a friend, having no idea if that was the right thing to do. We offered her food and a place to rest, not knowing if she would accept. We showed our joy and excitement, with no clue if those feelings would even be understood. Now, 20 years later, I look out at this galaxy and I see those very same gestures everywhere. Species that used to communicate only through stiff, formal protocols now break bread and share laughter," she said. "Beings that once saw each other as suspicious outsiders now build friendships that span the stars. We didn't do this by ourselves," Chen was quick to add. "We couldn't have. Every single species here helped build this new way of living together. But I'm so proud that humanity got to help kick things off. I'm proud that we looked at the galaxy's rigid, careful order and dared to ask, but what if we were all friends too?" She broke into a warm smile, and even after 2 decades among aliens, that simple human expression still had the power to make everyone feel at ease. "We aren't perfect," Chen concluded. "We'll never be perfect. But we are here. We are a part of you, and we are finally home. Thank you for opening the door. Thank you for taking a chance on us. And thank you for becoming our family." The ceremony ended with something that would have been utterly unimaginable 20 years ago. The representatives from 800 different species rose to their feet, and together they began to sing a song. It was an old human folk song, written centuries ago, but it had been lovingly translated and adapted by dozens of species. The words spoke of finding connection, of belonging, and of the profound joy of discovering you're not alone in a vast and silent universe. As all those voices, human and alien, rose in a single magnificent chorus, Captain Zur stood in the audience right next to Speaker Morov. "Do you remember how worried we were?" Zur asked his colleague Moravith quietly as they watched the ceremony. "Worried? I was terrified," Moravith admitted. "I truly believed humanity would shatter everything we'd spent centuries building." She then gestured toward a group of alien representatives who just weeks ago would barely speak to each other. Now they were singing together, harmonizing like old friends. "Instead," she said, her voice filled with wonder, "they showed us what we should have been building all along." On Earth and 1,000 other worlds, people watched. They saw the incredible future humanity had helped unlock. A future where differences were no longer a source of fear, but a reason to celebrate. A future where a stranger was just a friend you hadn't met yet. A future where chaos and order could dance together to create something more beautiful than either could ever be alone. And the galaxy was astonished, not because the humans had finally joined them, but because in doing so, the humans had transformed everyone into something better than they ever thought they could be. The galaxy had spent 50,000 years searching for Earth. But as it turned out, it was humanity that helped the galaxy finally find its heart.